What is a take that is your hill that you would die on in terms of the college football preseason? So kind of call your shot is what we asked y'all to do. And Joe did that in full force. He said Nebraska will be 7-0 going into Ohio State. First you hear that, you're like, 7-0? We're talking about Nebraska, the team that has won less than 6 games each of the last 2 seasons. I mean, I haven't made a bowl game since, Vietnam, it feels like. That Nebraska? And then you take a closer look at their schedule, not quite as crazy as you might think. The first 7 for Nebraska, they got UTEP, they got Colorado, they got Northern Iowa, all at home. You got Illinois at home. You're at Purdue, you play Rutgers, and then you have a bye, and then you play Indiana, is I believe how it works out. So looking at that schedule, I don't see a team right off the bat that's like, yep, pencil that one in as a loss. Now, we'll do we'll call our shot a little bit closer to the season when it comes to the actual record around Nebraska. But the games that jump out to me as some potential swing games, Illinois and Purdue, you beat both those teams last year. This is a team that turned the ball over, I think, as much as anybody else in the country last year. Nowhere near what Matt Rhule expects them to be long term. Colorado, I understand that was a tough game for you a season ago, but you get them at home. You turned the ball over 4 times last year in that game. Can't do that, but if they do that again in 2024, I'd be wildly surprised. Secondary has to be much better in that game if you want to beat Colorado. The point being, I think that's a winnable ball game. We'll predict it when it gets closer, but I think it's winnable. If you don't beat UTEP and Northern Iowa, we have other things to talk about. Rutgers and Indiana, if you're 5-0 going into those games, 6-0 I guess if you're talking about Indiana, I think the momentum would be a massive factor in helping you win that one. All these games are winnable. So Joe's calling his shot here. 7-0 I don't think is too wild of a take. Now, it would be refreshing in a lot of ways for the folks in Lincoln, but how do you get there? You get there by keeping the main thing. Same as accomplishing any other task. And I think when it comes to Nebraska winning football games in 2024, it comes down to, can you support Dylan Raiola? And when you do, can he make you right? Because Nebraska last season, the defense and the run game were the bread and butter. And quarterback was a revolving door, and quarterback was giving the football to the other team. It felt like every other play. 6% of their passes last year, I believe, ended in interceptions. One of the worst interception rates in the country. It's going to be a ping pong approach. Can you be able to do enough things well without making mistakes and wait for the other team to make a mistake and then capitalize? Like defense that allowed 18 points a game, 78% of the production is back from last year, has to be stable. The run game last year, they ran for, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of 175 yards a game. I don't know that you need 175, but you can get 150 a game. Boom, we'll take that. We'll run with it. Dylan Raiola, I do not see a world where he's not your starting quarterback game 1. So let's just move forward with that sort of qualifier on Nebraska. He just has to be able to run the show. Doesn't have to be the star. Doesn't have to be Leo DiCaprio being the number 1 actor in the movie, but he needs to be able to make good decisions, go to the right place with the football, and that defense should allow them to be in every single game they play in. So if they play mistake-free football and capitalize on the other team's mistakes, it's going to be interesting to watch. It's going to be very, very fascinating to see what they end up being in 2024. So here's the thing now. If this happens, just put yourself in the situation. If this happens, we're heading into, I think it's week 9 of the college football season, technically, October 26th, and we got Nebraska, and we got Ohio State. Let's just say they're both undefeated. Can you imagine the emotion and the juice at Nebraska? Can you imagine just the overall excitement at Nebraska? Because this is a fan base that's been starving, man. Like we've talked about a lot on this show. They are starving for relevance and for something that they can be excited about when it comes to that football field. Now, Matt Rhule brought a lot of that when he ended up being the head coach there, but they're still waiting on something substantial to wrap their arms around. And if they go 7-0, obviously you've already qualified for a bowl game. So boom, check that off the list. That's a big dub. I think at that point too, you've already, I think, surpassed the over-under win total for you in Vegas. I'll have to double check that. I think it's 6.5. It might be 7.5 if you're in Nebraska. So you're very close to surpassing if you haven't already surpassed that win total. And the biggest part of this to me, if you're a Nebraska fan, this would just feel like validation. It'd feel like all those years where you went and talked to your buddies around the one-score losses you had and how close you were, and if this thing broke that way, and if you made this kick and didn't turn the ball over against Minnesota, and if this happened and that happened, all those alternate realities you talked yourself into over the course of the last 2 to 3 seasons, and if it actually goes the way that it could go and you go 7-0, the validation of like, okay, I'm not crazy. Okay, we really were that close all those years. The foundation really was good for that long. Now, if you play Ohio State at Ohio State and how talented they are, we'll see what that game looks like. But going 7-0 into that game in itself, I think, would be a massive victory. Also, look at the rest of their schedule for Nebraska. How good, I mean, how many wins do they have to finish the season? Where's Nebraska sitting at the end of this thing? So Joe calling his shot. Joe, we appreciate you for it. Nebraska going 7-0 before they get to Ohio State. At first glance, it might sound a little bit crazy. When you unpack it, though, with some more depth, I think there's some legs to it. Again, we'll give you our prediction on Nebraska and their game-by-game season win total as we get closer and closer to the actual games being played. 7-0 is not a wild take from our friend Joe. Hey, y'all, thanks so much for watching. Subscribe to the channel here to make sure you don't miss an episode of The Hard Count. Also, be sure to check out other videos on the On3 YouTube channel.